Welcome back to Boss Economics World, folks, the only place where we call out the economic clown show for what it is, with zero sugarcoating and a healthy dose of sarcasm. I'm your host, the guy who's been yelling into the void about government mismanagement since the days of dial-up internet. Today, we've got a real doozy of a story, straight from the Congressional Budget Office, or as I like to call it, the Crystal Ball Office, because apparently, they're now in the business of predicting when the US government will officially run out of monopoly money. Spoiler alert, it's sometime between mid-August and the end of September 2025. Oh, and guess what? It's all thanks to the geniuses in Washington who think borrowing more is the answer to a debt crisis. Buckle up, folks, this is gonna be a wild ride. Let's break this down for the regular folks out there, those of you who've been watching your grocery bills skyrocket, your savings dwindle, and your faith in government competence evaporate faster than a puddle in Death Valley. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, that nonpartisan group of number-crunching wizards, just dropped a bombshell on June 9, 2025, the US government might not have enough cash to pay its bills on time sometime between mid-August and the end of September. Yep, you heard that right, your tax dollars, which are supposed to keep this country running, are apparently being managed with the foresight of a toddler in a candy store. And here's the kicker, this isn't even new news. Back in March 2025, the CBO warned that the so-called X date, the day Uncle Sam officially goes broke, was looming. But now, they've graciously pushed it back by 2 weeks, giving Congress just a teensy bit more time to negotiate a deal to, what else, raise the debt ceiling. Because, you know, when you're already drowning in $36.1 trillion of debt, the obvious solution is to borrow more. Brilliant. Someone give these people a Nobel Prize in economics, or at least a participation trophy. Now, for my finance pros in the audience, you're probably already pulling up the CBO's monthly budget review and nodding along sagely. You know the drill, the debt limit kicked back in at the start of 2025, and since then, the Treasury has been pulling every trick in the book, special accounting maneuvers, budget sleight of hand, you name it, just to avoid defaulting on federal obligations. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is sweating bullets, urging Republicans to pass a measure to boost the debt ceiling by mid-July. Why? Because if they don't, the US could officially run out of capacity to pay its bills on time in August. And trust me, folks, that's not the kind of default you can just fix with a quick reboot. On the surface, this story is just another chapter in the never-ending saga of debt ceiling showdowns. Every few years, Washington plays this game of chicken, where politicians posture, grandstand, and threaten to let the economy crash and burn unless they get their way. This time, the drama is tied to President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, a legislative Frankenstein that includes tax cuts, spending increases, and, of course, a measure to give the Treasury trillions more in borrowing authority. Because nothing screams fiscal responsibility like adding more fuel to a raging debt fire, right? But let's not kid ourselves, this isn't just about partisan bickering. This is about a systemic failure of economic management that's been decades in the making. And who's to blame? You guessed it, the government. The same folks who've been spending like drunken sailors on shore leave, racking up deficits faster than you can say, quantitative easing. And now, they're acting shocked, I tell you, that the bill is coming due. It's like watching someone max out 17 credit cards and then cry foul when the bank comes knocking. Oh, the humanity. Now, let's peel back the layers of this economic onion, and fair warning, it's gonna make you cry. The debt ceiling drama is just the shiny, distracting surface of a much deeper, uglier problem. Here's what's really going on, folks, from the point to the surface. First off, let's talk about that $36.1 trillion debt ceiling. That's right, trillion with a T. To put that in perspective, if you stacked $36.1 trillion in dollar bills, you could build a tower to the moon and back, twice. And here's the kicker, according to the US Treasury's latest data, as of June 2025, the federal debt to GDP ratio is hovering at a staggering 130%. For comparison, back in 2000, it was a quaint 55%. Even during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, it peaked at around 125%. In other words, we're not just in uncharted territory, we're in abandoned ship territory. Now, for my finance pros, you'll appreciate this. The CBO's own projections show that net interest payments on the federal debt will hit $1.2 trillion annually by 2030, surpassing spending on Medicare and defense. That's right, soon, we'll be spending more just to service our debt than to protect our borders or care for our elderly. And with interest rates rising, Federal Reserve hikes, those payments are only going to balloon further. The 10-year Treasury yield, as of June 2025, is sitting at 4.8%, up from 1.5% just 3 years ago. Do the math, folks, higher yields on $36.1 trillion of debt equals a fiscal tsunami waiting to happen. Next, let's talk about the root cause of this debt explosion, government spending. According to the CBO, federal spending in fiscal year 2025 is projected to hit $7.2 trillion, while revenues are expected to be just $5.8 trillion. That's a $1.4 trillion deficit in a single year, added to the already monstrous pile of debt. And what are we spending all this money on? Well, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill is a prime example: tax cuts that disproportionately benefit corporations and the ultra-wealthy, paired with spending increases that sound great on paper, like infrastructure and defense, but are riddled with inefficiencies and pork barrel waste. Don't believe me? Let's look at the data. The Tax Policy Center's latest analysis, June 2025, shows that the top 1% of earners received 45% of the benefits from Trump's tax cuts, while the bottom 60% got just 15%. Meanwhile, the Government Accountability Office reported in May 2025 that $235 billion in federal infrastructure spending was misallocated due to poor oversight and cronyism. So, while bridges crumble and roads rot, your tax dollars are funding some senator's pet project in Nowheresville, USA. Isn't that just peachy? Now, let's get to the debt ceiling itself. Here's the dirty little secret, folks: the debt ceiling isn't a solution, it's a distraction. Raising it doesn't fix the underlying problem of overspending and undertaxing, it just kicks the can down the road. And every time we raise it, we're essentially saying, hey, future generations, good luck paying off this mess. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, if current trends continue, the federal debt will hit $50 trillion by 2035, more than 150% of GDP. That's not an economy, that's a Ponzi scheme with extra steps. And let's not forget the global implications. The US dollar's status as the world's reserve currency is already under threat, with countries like China and Russia pushing for de-dollarization. In April 2025, the International Monetary Fund warned that rising US debt levels could undermine confidence in the dollar, potentially triggering a sell-off of US treasuries. If that happens, folks, we're not just talking about a recession, we're talking about a full-blown financial crisis. But hey, I'm sure Congress will figure it out over their 2-hour martini lunches, right? Finally, let's zoom out to the bigger picture: economic inequality. While Washington plays debt ceiling roulette, the average American is getting squeezed. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, real wages, adjusted for inflation, have stagnated since 2022, despite corporate profits soaring to record highs. The top 10% of Americans now own 92% of the nation's wealth, per the Federal Reserve's June 2025 report, up from 88% just 5 years ago. And with inflation still stubbornly high, hovering at 5.2% as of May 2025, per the Consumer Price Index, everyday folks are struggling to afford basics like food, housing, and healthcare. So, while politicians pat themselves on the back for saving the economy by raising the debt ceiling, the reality is, they're just propping up a system that's rotten to the core. And who pays the price? You do, folks, the hard-working taxpayers who are stuck footing the bill for this circus. Here's the bottom line, folks: this debt ceiling drama is just the latest symptom of a much bigger disease: government mismanagement. For decades, our so-called leaders have prioritized short-term political wins over long-term economic stability. They've spent recklessly, taxed inefficiently, and borrowed like there's no tomorrow. And now, tomorrow is here, and guess what? The piggy bank is empty. But don't take my word for it, look at the data. Look at the $36.1 trillion debt ceiling, the 130% debt to GDP ratio, the $1.4 trillion annual deficits. Look at the skyrocketing interest payments, the misallocated spending, the growing inequality. This isn't just bad policy, it's a recipe for disaster. And the worst part? The government's solution is to double down, to borrow more, to spend more, to kick the can down the road until it's too late. So, what's the fix? Well, if I were in charge, and trust me, folks, I'd run a tighter ship than this clown car, we'd start with real fiscal discipline. Cut wasteful spending, reform the tax code to close loopholes for the ultra-wealthy, and invest in policies that actually grow the economy, like education, healthcare, and green energy. But don't hold your breath, because the folks in Washington are too busy playing partisan ping-pong to do anything remotely sensible. So, here's my message to you, the regular folks and finance pros watching at home: wake up. This isn't just about some abstract X date or a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about your future, your kids' future, your country's future. Demand accountability from your leaders. Demand transparency. Demand real solutions, not just more empty promises and borrowed bucks. And hey, if you liked this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because trust me, folks, we're gonna need all the help we can get to keep shining a light on this economic dumpster fire. Until next time, this is Boss Economics World, signing off. Stay smart, stay skeptical, and stay solvent.